Hey everybody, welcome. I'm David Perell, and basically a little bit about me. So I run an online writing course called Rite of Passage. I have a podcast called The North Star, and in order to grow and build Rite of Passage, I work with Billy Bross, and Billy and I work together just on framing Rite of Passage and how to think about how it stands in the marketplace and where we want to go as a business. And so I've been working with Billy for a couple months now, and I'll let Billy introduce himself, but I see Billy as a copywriter, somebody who I've learned a lot from, and a lot of the way that we think about how to position Rite of Passage comes from conversations that Billy and I have. So we meet every other Friday and basically work through things like email funnels, work through things like framing my copy, and I'll let Billy introduce himself, but that's how we got to know each other.
Thank you. Yeah. Hey guys, Billy Bross. I know a lot of you, and good to meet the rest of you who I don't know yet. So I'm a business coach, and David is one of my awesome clients, and I specialize in working with online course creators, online education companies, people who sell virtual programs. I got started doing this back in 2010, selling courses in the beer brewing niche of all things, and have now worked in a little over 50 niches so far, and just love helping subject matter experts like David get the word out about their awesome content. And really the thing for me, that I didn't take the traditional path as a copywriter. I had a formal business education. But then when I went to go learn how to sell beer brewing classes on the internet, those skills didn't come in too handy. So I discovered this thing called copywriting, and it's just made all the difference. So I think it's gonna be a really cool presentation because David is very much the publishing guy, the content guy, how to write online to grow your business and grow your career. And when you incorporate these copywriting strategies that I'll share with you, you can really pour fuel on your fire. So thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So basically here is the plan. So what's going to happen is I'm going to talk a little bit about copy and really just content, and then Billy's going to talk about copy. So what we believe is that this is sort of a two-step strategy where you start off and you share your content, you share your ideas, and that's what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about how to build authority in your niche by writing. Then I'm going to talk about what I call audience first products. Then I'm going to share for the very first time ever, actually, my lead method of building authority. I've never shared this before, and you are the very first people who are going to get this. I'm going to give some examples of people who lead really well, talk about coining your own term. And then I am going to talk about what I call the big fish, small but growing pond strategy, which I've seen work very well among many different audiences or many different creators in terms of building authority in their niche. So I'm going to start off, and I just have a keynote that I want to share with you. Can all of you see this? Does it look good? Just give me a thumbs up.
Looks good. We can see your next slide too, though. I don't know if you mean to be sharing
Okay,
that.
that's exactly what I asked. Okay, so let me just reshare then. How about now?
Looks good.
Okay, great. So yeah, as I said, we're going to talk about building authority, leading, creating terms, and the big fish, small but growing pond strategy. So I'm very inspired by this quote from Nathan Barry, who's the CEO of ConvertKit. And I think that this frames what we're going to talk a lot about today. And he says, if you know a skill that other people use to make money, you can make a living by teaching that skill. Think through the people who are well known in your industry. Why do you know who they are? Are they the most talented? Sometimes, but often not. Almost always, it is because they teach. And I think that that's a really good place to frame where we're going to begin today's lunch and learn, where what you see is time and again, what I think traps a lot of people is that they think that you need to build expertise in order to start writing, right? That you need your PhD, that you need your MBA, whatever it is. But what I believe is that you don't have to wait until you're an expert by writing, by publishing in order to write and in order to publish. You can actually become an expert by doing that. And that the process of reading, synthesizing, talking to people, and writing is the process by which you become an expert. So do not wait to teach until you're an expert when you can build expertise by teaching. And I have this idea, something I've seen recently. I spent a lot of time just looking at the landscape, and it's an idea called audience first products. And so this is how I think about building companies, how I think about building audiences, where before the internet, mostly what we saw was that companies built products before they built their audiences. So an example of this would be like take Tide, right? Like Tide laundry detergent. So what they would do is some scientist in a lab would go out and they would brew up some concoction, and they would put it into that big orange container. And then they'd say, hey, we have a product and we want to go share it with you. So they might go to Costco, they might go to Walmart, and now it's time to sell that product. But we don't have brand recognition. So what do? Well, we have shelf placement, but we need people to know who we are. So what do? They go and they paint the hoods of NASCARs, and then they have big Super Bowl ads, they have big banner ads in Times Square, all those sorts of things. And so what you saw was that companies built products before they built audiences. Now what's happening, and this is what I did, was I wrote for 3 years before I even thought about building Rite of Passage. I built up a decent audience, and then I said, what does my audience want? And that's always what I ask now. What does my audience want that they're not getting from something? And I said, you know what? My audience will really want to learn how to write. And so through that, we now 1 year into Rite of Passage, we've had more than 500 students, and I've never spent a single cent on paid marketing. And that's because we've used the audience that I built before and then built the product for that audience. So once again, before the internet, companies built products before audiences. Now they build audiences before products. And what's really cool about writing online is you get this great feedback loop. And what you end up getting is you get instant, high quality feedback on the ideas that you share. So I published an article yesterday, and I've already gotten all of these responses from people who said, I don't agree with you here. This was a really interesting point. Hey, you should talk about that a little bit more. And then what ends up happening is that, the way that we're taught to think about opportunities, and this gets back into building authority, was we're taught to just wait until there's an opportunity. What is the next step along the path? Is it that you're going to go get your master's? Is it that now you've been at your consulting company for 6 years and it's time to get promoted? And masters of using the internet, they don't go follow opportunities, they attract opportunities. They realize that opportunities aren't really found, they're really created, and you make them. And by sharing ideas, you attract like-minded people. Those like-minded people then come into your life, give you interesting conversations, and then you can improve your content, which then attracts more like-minded people, smarter people who improve your conversations, and then you get in this great feedback loop. So that's sort of the high level philosophy of how to do this. Now the question is, what do you actually do? What are like the 4 things that you can do? Remember, I talked about lead. And so here's how I think about lead.
Hey, David, can I just say one thing about that?
Please.
Yeah, so that's actually how I met you.
Yes.
And it was interesting because it wasn't direct, it was indirect. But I found you through content that someone published, our mutual friend and your business partner and my other client, Tiago Forte.
Yep.
So I don't know how I came across it, but Tiago is a prolific blogger. He has amazing content on productivity. I discovered that content. I enrolled in his course. We connected. I took him on as a client, and I met you through him. So you're right. If he hadn't have hit published, well, and look what happened. Now he's got a book coming out pretty soon here too. That's we know is going to be a bestseller. So I just love that idea of publishing to create opportunities for yourself, not trying to seek out opportunities.
Yeah, exactly. So this is what the internet, just building off of Billy's point, like this is what the internet is really good at, right? Like it is the best matching tool ever created. So what you do is you think of radio frequencies, right? So at any moment you can listen to any frequency on the radio. Like you could listen to 92.7 FM, or you could do like 104.6. But like growing up in San Francisco, this was on AM now. the San Francisco Giants, my favorite baseball team, they always played on 680. And my dad liked 740, which was the news station. And so 680 was like ESPN radio. That was my thing. 740 was dad's thing. And we could just flock to different ones. And so what you're doing when you're writing online is you're putting out your frequency into the world, 97.4, and you attract all the 97.4s into your life. So who do I want? I want people who are super intellectually curious, really ambitious, people who are earnestly working to make the world a better place, but then also want to do that with a tremendous level of kindness and generosity. And if people don't have, especially the kindness and generosity, I'm just not interested in having them on my frequency. And so what my frequency is trying to attract those curious, kind, generous, and ambitious people into my life, and to basically become a magnet for all those people. And so in order to do that, I try to lead. So how do you actually lead? So what you do is, leading is a 4-part acronym. And you want to start off by learning as much as you can. So that just means being a sponge for whatever it is that you're interested in. Like Billy and I, when we work together, he's always recommending these books on online education. We were talking about Gary Halbert copywriting. Billy has spent years actually compiling and synthesizing the knowledge of really old school experts in the copywriting field. And then what he does in his email list, which all of you should subscribe to, and in his work with me and the sessions that he runs, he educates. And he teaches the best of what he learns. Billy has spent years and years distilling all of this knowledge. He built an online course in the beer industry, and having done it himself, he's now working with all these different clients. And now he's like at the center of this ecosystem with all these different course creators. A lot of us are focused on productivity. And so what Billy does is, when we meet, look, I don't even study online education. I just have Billy tell me what's happening. And Billy, every 2 weeks, he is now educating me on what's going on. And I read every single newsletter that he sends. And then what we do is we ask. So to use Billy again, Billy has a mastermind group in Los Angeles. And that mastermind group meets all the time, and they're talking and sharing best practices. And that's what I do, the same sort of thing. I'd like to talk to other online course creators. Tiago is my partner so that I can ask other people for feedback. I had a call yesterday with actually the founder of Udemy, who was talking to me about, we were just riffing back and forth on what the future of education could look like, and where the opportunities sort of at the platform level, where the opportunities at the course level. And I'm working with, whenever I can, try to spend time with different online course creators and ask, get feedback, talk to experts in my field. So then what ends up happening is you learn, you educate, you ask, and then what does the D stand for? You distill. And what that distillation is you're summarizing your knowledge and you're sharing it with other people. So what you're doing is you're getting in this framework. And once again, it's this feedback loop. You're learning, educated, asking, and distilling, where what ends up happening is you get to distill is your ideas begin to be refined. Like even yesterday, Billy and I were doing coaching, and I said something, and Billy said, wait, I've never heard you say that before. And the seeds of that idea had been there for months. But what ended up happening was I had distilled how rite of passage is different from traditional writing education in a way that Billy had never heard before. And Billy said, you know what, that's a distillation. Keep that. I wrote it down, and that'll probably turn into an essay at some point. So the question is, after you lead, after you learn, educate, ask, and distill, who does this well? Who are role models that we can look for? And I think that there's 3 examples of companies, bigger companies, that I think do this really, really well. HubSpot, Permanent Equity, and IDEO. What HubSpot does really well is they invented this term called inbound marketing. And this is something that I want to encourage all of you to do, to invent terms, to coin terms. Because what ends up happening is, you could think of it from a search engine optimization level, where if you're trying to be top of search results for marketing, oh my goodness, that's so hard. But if you can coin your own term like inbound marketing, you can own that term. And because it's your term, everybody's linking back to you. And so you have the best search engine optimization. Whenever somebody thinks of inbound marketing, they think of HubSpot. Next, I really like this company, Permanent Equity. It is run by a friend named Brent Beshore. And what they do is they basically, it's in the name, they have permanent equity. So they buy businesses and they plan to own those businesses permanently, but then they also take money where most investors take money that they, like a venture capitalist has to return that money in generally 10 years. They have a 25-year commitment from their investors with an option to extend for another 25 years. It's unheard of in private equity, and that's why it's called permanent equity. So they have coined that term. And then finally, IDEO and design thinking. They say it right here. IDEO did not invent design thinking, but we have become known for design thinking and applying it to problems, to solving problems large and small. And so what you see here is whenever somebody thinks of inbound marketing, they think of HubSpot. Whenever somebody thinks of permanent equity, Brent wants them to think of their firm, Permanent Equity. And then whenever IDEO thinks of whenever somebody thinks of design thinking, IDEO wants people to think of them. And if you talk to people in the field, that's almost exactly what they say. So when it comes to doing this, after you've wanted to make a living for yourself and you've invented a name, you've built expertise, coined your own term, you've told the world about it, you're inspired by IDEO and Permanent Equity and HubSpot, what kind of industries should you actually look for? That's really the million-dollar question here. So should you go study solar panels? Should you go study circuit breakers and computers? Should you go study the future of Post-it notes? I don't know, maybe the future of honestly, if anyone can find an answer to this, I'll read the essay. I don't know why Dixon Ticonderoga erasers are so much better than every other pencil, but maybe that's something you want to focus on. But what I would sort of advise you to think of, is what I call the big fish, small but growing pond strategy. So what does that mean? Well, this is what I've seen amongst all my friends who have basically gone from small to big on the internet in a very short time and use the internet to radically transform their careers and their lives. And what you want to do, 3 steps. 1, pick a small and growing market that's underestimated. 2, learn obsessively about that industry. And 3, share as much as you can by writing online. So I'll throw that in the chat for all of you right after I stop talking. And I think that there's 2 examples here that are really good. And the first is a guy named Andrew Wilkinson. He's in Victoria, outside of Vancouver. And what he does is he saw an opportunity to buy sort of these boring back-end digital businesses, and rather than getting the sexiest businesses, he would buy the back-end businesses. And he thought that private equity for online businesses was going to be a big growing market. And he started the firm, I think, in 2009. And he's been doing this for now, 11 years now. And that's exactly what he's done. He has become the person. If you want to sell a small online business, you go to Andrew, and he has made a name for himself in that area. So you can see it was a small but growing area of little internet businesses. 2, he learned obsessively about it. He now owns 26 different companies, and he's built an online audience around it. But then my favorite example is my friend Yassine. And when he was going to be between his junior and his senior year in college, he was at Penn University or University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia. And it was his senior year. He went to go intern for a venture capital firm. And he's there, and it's middle of July. He can't figure out how to help. What is he going to do? He's working, and he's just pouring coffee, printing out papers, and Yassine's a smart guy, ambitious guy. He's like, I want to be doing something better. So he starts thinking, okay, what can I do that other people don't know how to do? What would my competitive advantage be? What is that small but growing pond? And he said, you know what? I'm going to start learning crypto. So in his internship, he became the crypto expert for the firm. And he went back to school his senior year, learn. First job out of college, 22 years old. director of cryptocurrency research for ARK Invest, which manages $7 billion in assets, because he found that small but growing market without a lot of competition, and he wrote about it.
Amazing.
So
I have an example.
Yeah, go for it, please.
This one just popped into my head. Have any of you ridden those scooters, the Bird scooters or the Lime scooters? You know those crazy things?
Yeah.
Have you been on one of those? Yeah. They're all over the place. I live in the Santa Monica, Los Angeles area, which I think is where they started. And think what you will about them. I thought they were pretty cool at first. Now they're getting a little bit annoying. And now I have friends who have like had some serious spills on them, and I've like gone to the hospital because of these things. So I won't touch them. But I thought it was a really cool, but it's an up and coming industry. And not just the scooters, but all this, they call it micro mobility. Have you guys heard that term?
Yep.
Yeah, I didn't know that was a thing. I thought it was just, it was these crazy scooters. But it's not just those. You have the electric bikes, Uber's in the game now, Lyft is in the game. They have these things called one wheels. If you ever seen one of those, it's like super futuristic. And so I heard that term and I typed it into Google, and sure enough, there was a podcast on it, the Micromobility Podcast. So it's not writing, but it's just a really good example of what you're talking about, to find that growing pool, right? And really stake your claim in there. And you don't have to be the expert in it. There's probably people who know way more about micromobility than the two people doing that podcast. But that's not the point. The point is, just by hitting publish, that's instant authority. And that's what I love about this concept.
You're going to lose your mind. Oliver Bruce, who runs the Micromobility Podcast, was in Rite of Passage.
Are you kidding? I had no idea.
How crazy is that?
We didn't plan this ahead of time, gang. That seriously just popped into my head now.
This is exactly what happened. So we were in Rite of Passage, I call this a personal monopoly. And we were in like session 9, and this guy would always wake up in early. He lives in New Zealand. This guy, Oliver Bruce, great New Zealand accent. And we started talking, and he's like, yeah, I have this micromobility podcast. It's my personal monopoly. And I was like, dude, I love your podcast. You and Horace, it's so good. And he's like, yeah, that's me. And same sort of thing. It's like a great example of this.
Amazing. What a coincidence. And he's a student in your course. Small world.
The internet is so cool. This is what I mean. The internet is the world's the world's best matching platform.
Yeah.
So I'll just summarize here before I let Billy chat and do a similar presentation. So once again, as you think through this, just remember 4 things: build authority, lead, which stands for learn, educate, ask, and distill, create terms like micro mobility. I mean, how good is that? And then remember, big fish, growing pond. All right. Thank you, everybody.
All right. Great job. Okay. So I would love to see too, if you guys are in an existing niche, go ahead and type that in. We did our locations. Let's see what different niches we're in. I know a few of yours. I know Steve's. Steve teaches guitar, teaches music, teaches musicians how to grow their career. Blockchain. I love this. Politics, finance, stock market. I help parents raise money smart kids. Man, that is needed. Home fitness, photography, finance training, female solopreneurship. Very cool, Catherine. Conversational design. Yeah. Start publishing. Seriously. It's been everything for me. I mean, I sold my beer website a number of years ago, but first thing I did was started writing blog articles. And I just said, you know what? I'm not going to worry about short-term results. I'm just going to hit publish consistently 3 days a week. That was my thing. I remember I was going on vacation. I was living in Virginia. I went snowboarding in Colorado. My buddy's like dragging me out the door. He's like, come on, man, we got to go. The slopes are open. I'm like, no, I didn't finish my 3rd blog post for the week. And I got that thing done and I got it out there. And I did it consistently for years. And I built up a vault of 500, 600 blog posts and pages. And to this day, that site, because I know the new owner, he's a buddy of mine, still gets 30, 40, 50,000 unique visitors a month. So these are evergreen assets you're building in your business too. Now, the one thing I didn't do this quite at first, but I did it after I hired a coach, a copywriting coach, is I started to spruce up that content with really good copywriting strategies. Because it's the whole It's not if you build it, they will come, right? You have to get the word out there about your content. And so when I first discovered copywriting, well, when I first heard the term, I thought it was some legal term. I thought it was copywriting with an R. It's copywriting with a W. And what it is essentially, it's salesmanship in print. That's how I like to describe it. And even if you're not selling a product, you're selling that blog post. You're selling that YouTube video. You're selling whatever it is that you're promoting. And the most valuable thing these days is attention. It's really tough to get people's attention and to hold it. And so you need, but you can do it, but you need a set of tools, and copywriting is that tool. So I could talk for days and days and days on end about copywriting, but I'm going to give you guys 5 really crunchy tactics right here that you can use to amplify this content that David is telling you to create. So let me go ahead and switch over. Okay, and there we go. Okay, all good? We good, David? All right. And take some notes, because I'm going to be talking and not everything's going to be on the slide. I'll give you some really good, again, tactical things. So write them down. All right. So the first one is, don't underestimate the importance of the headline. It kills me when I see an amazing blog post or an amazing product on a sales page and the headline is just meh. And it happens all the time. And what really kills me is that, well, David and like Steven, people who know me will tell you that even though I do online marketing, I'm not super techie, right? Like David was saying, I'm kind of old school. I study these old school copywriters, these mail order marketers from the 20s. And so, you know, and it's because I'm lazy. I like simplicity. I don't like all these complicated funnels and all the bells and whistles and everything. But what I see is, and what really kills me is when I see, say, a sales page for a product. It might be an online course. I work with a lot of those. And there's some really complicated funnel that no doubt takes a lot of time to maintain and probably breaks every other day. And then a really bad headline. Because what I would rather have, if I want to double conversions on a sales page or on a funnel, you could build a really complicated funnel with all these bells and whistles and countdown timers and all that stuff. Or you can hit delete on the headline and type in a better headline, and it'll do the same thing. And it'll take you a fraction of the time, and you won't have anything to break on you. So you might have heard this stat, but 80% of people don't get past the headline. And look, by headline, I don't mean just on the sales page. Your email subject line is a headline. Your YouTube video, the title of that YouTube video is a headline. The first words that people read in a tweet, that's a headline. A Facebook post, it's kind of interesting with Facebook. They have, if you run a Facebook ad, they have a headline field, but is that the first thing you see when you're scrolling down your news feed? No, it's actually, you see it, it's underneath the image, right? So the first thing you read is actually the text field. So that would be considered the headline. So the most important thing is to grab someone's attention. And when you pay, I did freelance copywriting for a little bit. And people who are like the top of this field, they'll charge $100,000 to write a sales letter, one of those long form sales letters, $100,000. So if you're a business owner paying someone that much money, once they've written the headline, you spent $80,000. So that's a good way to look at it. Okay. So what I mean by crafting a collar grabbing headline is you want to do an audit of your headlines and see if it passes this test. Does it reach out of the screen, out of the phone, the iPhone, or the laptop, grab the reader by the collar and pull them in? That's what it needs to do. Because if it doesn't do that, then people are just going to scroll right past it. And then they're never going to consume that amazing content that you crafted. So let me give you a couple of tips on the headline here. 2 most important things to include in a headline are a benefit and curiosity. So read through headlines and you'll notice a lot of headlines just kind of say what the topic is, but there's not really anything in there for the reader. So ask yourself this question when you're looking at your headlines: what's in it for me, the reader? And if you can have some curiosity in there, then that's even better. because you create this curiosity gap where you hint at something and people just have to know what comes after that. So there's a lot of, you can Google, there's a lot of really good copywriting or headline formulas out there. 3 that I like a lot: the how-to headline. So how many people have read this book? How to Win Friends and Influence People. Type yes in the chat if you read this. So this actually, there's a sales letter. You can look it up. You can still find it online. There's an old school black and white sales letter. This was the headline on the sales letter: How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's the title of a book, but it's a phenomenal headline. So you really can't go wrong. If you just type how to, you'll check that box on, actually both those boxes. It implies a benefit. Oh, I'm going to learn something. And it makes people curious. Oh, I want to figure out what that is. Numbers. Numbers always do really well. Why? Because they stoke curiosity. 5 ways to do this, 7 ways to do this, 10 ways to do this. And ideally, this has a benefit in it. And a third one that I like a lot is to ask a question. So there's a really famous ad I recommend everyone read. It's maybe one of the best of all time. Another old school one. I like those examples. Do you make these mistakes in English? Do you make these mistakes in English? Now, who can point out what's especially ninja about that headline? There's a certain word in there. It's the word these. And I believe, I have to look this up, I think they did a test. I think they actually, the first version of the headline was, do you make mistakes in English? And then they added the word these. Do you make these mistakes in English? And what that did was it checked that second box. Now there's curiosity, because the word these implies that there's something down below that headline, which there is. And I'll just leave you with this. With the headline, the goal is not to sell your product. The goal is to get them to read the next line. I see a lot of, especially on online course sales pages, the headline's trying to sell the product and there's a buy now button right there. I'm like, get the buy button out of there and make the headline just sell the next line. Because the more people read, the more sold they're going to be. So we want them to read all the way down the sales page and then get to the buy button. Okay. So put a lot of effort into the headlines. My clients will tell you I have them write 20, 30, 40 headlines before deciding on one. So just, bang out a whole bunch. Right, David?
Yeah, then we bang our head against the wall. But that's exactly right. Billy, I mean, even yesterday, we must have gone through, even when we're together, we go through probably 8 to 10 different headlines. And actually, this is standard. I was talking to a journalist at Vox who said the same thing. Every article, 10 different headlines.
Yeah.
10 headlines.
Yeah, absolutely. And the way you really find the best headline is by talking to your customer. I mean, you can have all the formulas in the world. That's no guarantee of success. It's what those words are. And it's got to really speak to them. And I know people some people might hear what I'm saying and be like, oh, you mean those clickbaity things? Yeah. Okay. But that's a whole different thing. Like, it doesn't need to be clickbaity. Like those, what are those websites? Like the BuzzFeed and all them, they're going for advertising dollars. So all they need is people to hit that page and they've made their money. So it doesn't need to be like hypey or over the top or anything. It just has to speak to either a problem that people have or a desire that they have. So keep that in mind. Okay, so a little backstory. I used to work at a theme park, a water park as a lifeguard in Virginia called Water Country USA. And certain rides, they would have, you've seen these at theme parks, they would have these signs and it would say, you have to be 4 feet or taller or 5 feet or taller to ride this ride. So people are always looking for things like that. They're looking for signs. They want to know if this is right for them. You think about driving up to a toll booth, right? And they have all these toll lanes. And it's like, well, and what do? You look at the signs and you ask yourself, which is the right one for me? Cash, credit, easy pass, men's and women's bathrooms, right? We're always asking ourselves, we're always tying it back to us because that's what we're interested in. We're interested in ourselves and if something is relevant to us. But because, especially in these more niche topics that we're talking about, where we tend to geek out, which is a great thing, we get too close to them and we assume that everyone knows. That's why it's so good. I mean, I have a coach. I'm obviously David's coach. That's why it's so good to have someone reflect on you and be like, hey, like, why are you assuming that everyone knows what you're talking about? So a really good copywriting strategy is to call out your audience, tell them who this is for. So you'll see this on a lot of sales pages, actually above the headline, and you'll see words like attention. So it might be attention online course creators, attention coaches, attention men who are recently divorced and want to get back into the dating game. Some other phrases that you can use here to call out your audience, the word for. So for writers who want to reach a wider audience. Intended for. Ideal for. Maybe it's ideal for, I don't know, guitar players, electric guitar players, because Steve is not here. So think about who your audience is and tell them explicitly that this is for them, because if it's not, then you don't want them reading anyways. They're not a well-qualified prospect for you. All right. This is a big one. So you want to write like you talk. This was, David and I were talking about this the other day. We were talking about English class and I was saying how my fourth grade English teacher used to just red pen the crap out of my essays because they were very conversational. And it's funny because that's actually the thing that led to my success in having an online business, was my conversational style of writing. And I got out of this for a while because before I started doing stuff online, I was working for a small engineering company in the clean energy industry and writing technical reports for the government, which is like the opposite of copywriting. I mean, like very, very dry and boring stuff. So when I left that world, I had to shake off all those bad habits and get back to my conversational way of writing. But, I still see a lot of people, especially people, if you have a more academic background, like if you've gone to college or grad school or something, you're probably stuck in that mode where you're really worried about, having, a big idea up top and then 3 supporting paragraphs and a concluding paragraph. You have these big blocks of text. That's not what works when it comes to persuasion. The ideal way to persuade someone would be in person. Right? That's why you can usually sell, big deals, like multi-million-dollar deals are not done through a sales page. They're done through in-person meetings. But you can't reach as many people that way. So when you're writing, you need to take that same approach. And they should really forget, you did it right when they forget that they're reading. They should forget that they're reading a page and they should hear your voice in their head. So what you want to do is create a dialogue. So you might ask them questions. So you might make a statement and say something like, does that make sense? Do you follow me? You're writing this in your content, whether it's an email or a blog post or whatever. You might say, let me explain. You might say, stay with me. And what you can even do is imply a benefit in there too. So it's kind of combining those two strategies. So you might say something like, let me tell you why this is important. Or if you want to take more of the negative approach, moving away from pain, not so much towards the gain, say, let me tell you why you don't want to go down that path. So you guys, do you see how that's very conversational? You guys, if you join my newsletter, you'll see I do this all the time. David, you've probably noticed it. I'll ask a question. I'll say something like, so does that make sense? And then I'll even reply to it too. I'll say, does that make sense? Good. Now let me get to the next point. So these are just things that you can sprinkle into your copy. It's going to make it more conversational and thus more persuasive. And remember, our goal is to get them to consume the whole thing. If it's a sales page, that's going to wind up with the buy button. If it's something else, well, we'll get to that. I got another slide on that. Okay, David, have I told you this one yet? The law of work? I haven't? Unbelievable. Okay, cool. Well, this will save us some time on our next session. So, like I said, when I had this formal business background, I got my MBA, but that didn't help me too much when it came to writing online, because you learn finance, management, accounting, and all that. But what they don't teach you there is sales and negotiation, pretty valuable things. So I hired a copywriting coach, the top copywriting coach I could find, a guy named David Garfinkel. And on our very first session, he goes, Billy, I got to teach you Garfinkel's law of work. And actually, he told me not to tell anyone. But he has a podcast now, and I saw he had an episode about it, so I think it's okay. So Garth, yeah, don't get mad at me because you're already talking about this. So here's the law of work. The law of work is whoever does the work gets paid. And I'll explain what that means. If you, as the writer, the publisher, do the work, and by the work I mean explaining to the reader why, well, let's go back to what I said earlier, saying who this is for. What are the benefits of it? What are the negative consequences of not doing what you recommend? Connecting all the dots for them. That's doing the work. The worst thing you can do is just assume. The worst phrase you can say is, oh, they'll get it. Do not, if you're saying that, oh, they'll understand, you're violating the law of work. And if that happens and they have to do the work, if they have to connect the dots, if they have to see how this is going to change their life, if they're reading David's sales page and they're like, okay, I get it, you teach writing, but what's that going to do for me? David knows it's going to grow your career. It's going to grow your business. It's going to get you funding. It's going to get you opportunities. But if his reader has to do that work and figure that out, they're going to get paid in the form of them keeping the money that they were going to pay you. So that's the law of work. Let me know if you have any questions about that or any of these. Okay, finally, how are we on time here? Oh, cool. We're good. Perfect. Always have a next step. So this is called the failure of the last mile, where you can do a great job of getting your content out there, drawing people in, grabbing them by the shirt collar, pulling them in, saying it's for them, doing all the work for them, connecting the dots, showing them benefits. And then so many people drop the ball at the last second. So what makes, copywriting, I'm talking about direct response copywriting here, by the way. It's not so much brand copywriting. That's sort of a different beast. That's like Super Bowl commercials, Coca-Cola and all that. That's more like cutesy, clever copywriting. That's not what I mean. Direct response copywriting is what you want to study because it's the best way for small businesses to make money. Coca-Cola, they don't need to get a response right away. They're just trying to instill this feeling, right? Where you think of like a sweet, tasty drink and you think of Coca-Cola. Small businesses, they don't do that. We need a response right away. We need them to take an action. And that's why you want to have what they call a call to action at the end of all your content, a CTA, as they call it. And this might be, if it's a sales letter, it might be a buy now button. But even if not, even if you're just writing a blog, always have a call to action at the end. What do you want them to do? What is that specific step that they should take? So it might be to leave a comment. It might be to tweet the blog post, to share it. Again, this kind of ties into the law of work, but you write a great blog post and you think, oh man, people are going to share it. Not necessarily, but they will if you tell them to. There's actually, it was years ago, early days of the internet, someone did a study, a split test on this, because one way that you can really sort of turbocharge this idea of having a call to action is to make it very, very specific what you want them to do. And so I don't remember the exact test, but it was something like, this must have been like 2007 or 8. So because Twitter was out. And then CTA at the end of the article was, follow me on Twitter. And he tested that, how many people clicked that. But then he tested, follow me on Twitter right here. And right here was hyperlinked. And that like doubled conversions. It's crazy. So people like to be told exactly what to do. Again, don't leave it to chance. And eating my own dog food. We're all done. So if you guys like this, I got a 20-minute email challenge on my website. And there's a lot of these strategies, these copywriting strategies incorporated into that. So I know a lot of you have newsletters, or you should at least, and writing them can be a challenge. But really, you can bang these things out in 20 minutes and make them really good. So go to billybross.com/training to get that. It's a multi-part email series. Again, specific. All right, and that's all I got. If we want to open it up to questions. everyone's adding CTAs at the end of their content now.
There we go. There was one question that I saw. I think it was on audience building. Oh, here we go. Well, I got a good one on what's the best way to ask for feedback. I mean, the best way to ask for feedback, I think, is there's a couple ways. This is hard, and it's actually one of the big reasons why Rite of Passage is so built around feedback, because I know that that's hard to do when you first begin writing. And so a lot of the way that we've structured Rite of Passage is to give feedback on Monday nights are really devoted to feedback. We have an entire day for feedback on Sundays. And so what I would recommend is talk to friends for feedback, but that's sort of like very standard. I would reframe what it means to give and to receive feedback, because the whole world is feedback. You are always getting feedback. And I think often I would almost question the premise behind that question, where that question is saying to receive feedback. It's very deliberate. I am looking at your faces right now to see what am I saying that's resonating, and then when are you turning away? And in all conversations, that's what's happening. And so in Rite of Passage, we use something called CRIBS, which stands for confusing, repeated, insightful, boring, and surprising. And when you talk to someone, you know when someone is confused, right? They sort of tilt their head like this. They're like, huh. If somebody is surprised, they'll laugh or they'll be engaged with you. And you don't want to have a communication style that's always like, listen to me, right? It's like much more like a movie, a drama, an ebb and flow of emotion. But you do not want people to be bored, right? There's like, even in a Quentin Tarantino movie with those really long beginnings, right? Like Hateful Eight, it goes on and on and on. But hopefully Tarantino would say that's setup, and that is setting up for the times in the movie that are surprising later. And he wouldn't want you to be bored. So I think that what I would say to getting feedback is think through your conversations. When you are talking about the ideas, before you actually write them, pay attention to when people are confused, when you're repeating something, when something's insightful, boring, or surprising. When somebody's confused, re-say it or just don't talk about that. When something's repeated, you don't need to say that. If something's insightful, double down on that idea. If something is boring, take it out. And if something is surprising, that's good. You want to build up those surprises. That's good communication. And so for the feedback point, all of you can get feedback from conversation.
Yeah, and just to piggyback on that too, numbers too. Numbers don't lie. You know, everyone has an opinion, but the great thing about doing things digitally is that we can track these things, right? So if you want to get feedback on an article, publish it and see check your Google Analytics and see what it says. See how long people stay on the page. Look at heat maps. Put in, if you want to test an idea, put in we call it a lead magnet, maybe a freebie that people opt in for. Stick it in your article and see what kind of response you get. So follow the numbers. Okay, let's see here. I think this might be a good one for you, David, from Stephen here. How do you balance authority and attention with humility?
Yeah, I mean, what I would say is that you don't want to be making claims about what you don't know. I'm not, like the point here is not like, I'm not a quantum physics expert. You're not going to see me writing about quantum mechanics and how quantum time travel is going to take off sometime in the next 10 years. That's just not my thing, right? Like I really didn't write about coronavirus at all. That's not what I know. With that said, there are things that I'm not an expert on, that I do have opinions on, that I do write about as I learn about them. And an example right now has been online education. I've been doing online education for 1 year, and I've read like 2 books about it, and I enjoy writing about it. I think it's interesting. I have firm beliefs on what is right, what is wrong, the way that we should be educating, the way we shouldn't be educating. And I write all the time about the importance of agency, about the importance of treating kids like real human beings instead of trapping them in these prisons that we call school. Like I have beliefs on this, you know what I mean? And at the same time, I know that that's not something that I'm an expert on. So you're not going to see me writing about the 1972 study on memory, and how that memory study, going back to John Dewey, who is like the forefather of the philosophy of American education, I don't know those things, so I don't write about them. So my point here is I don't need a PhD in education to start writing about them. I write about the things that I have conviction on, the things that I do know well, my own experiences, but I don't write about things that are way outside my circle of competence because I don't want to be spreading misinformation or anything like that.
I totally agree. I'm going to take this one from Kevin. A lot of copywriters will advise filtering your first draft writing through apps like the Hemingway app. Great app, by the way, guys. Look up the Hemingway app. It can really help your writing. To keep your writing concise, but it feels like that might be at odds with the conversational tone since you may cut out a lot of your personality. How do you balance this? Good question. Yeah, so I think what you're asking is if you start adding in some of the dialogue that I was talking about, asking things like, does that make sense? Do you follow me? It makes it longer, right? Yeah, good question. So think about fiction books. Think about novels, right? They sell better than anything else. There's a lot of that. There's a lot of that dialogue. And so what happens is people, they scroll right past it. I mean, they read it. Like you don't even really notice. You don't slow down at all. When you get this rhythm and you get this dialogue going, people will just fly right through it. And they won't even realize that it's kind of long. There's a saying in copywriting that a sales letter can't be too long, only too boring. So if you keep it interesting and you keep it conversational, don't write more than you have to. Make it as short as you can, but you don't really have to worry about that. All right. I got some questions about software here. I saw someone had one about, Catherine, any suggestions for newsletter platforms? Something simple just to get started and hit publish. For newsletter platforms, well, if we're talking, I don't know if there's something else I don't know about with, I think there are like newsletter platforms out there. David, you might know more about this. I know about email software. So I use Entreport. A lot of my clients use ConvertKit. I got started on Aweber back in the day. I think that's still a good one. ActiveCampaign. I don't know, David, are there like newsletter platforms out there?
Yeah, I mean, the two big ones are Substack and ConvertKit. I just added a note in the chat. I would just caution all of you against thinking that the tool is going to make your success. It is the furthest thing from the truth. You want a system that works, that can transport to any single tool. And if you're mostly focused on the tool, you're doing yourself a disservice. Learn the system, then walk back to the tools.
Yeah, and you'll see if you get on my newsletter, I take a very different approach when it comes to a newsletter. It's very, the tradition, I think when people think email newsletter, they think like HTML and there's like different sections and all that. I mean, like, David, like your Monday Musings is a more typical newsletter. I take more of a storytelling approach. And I email like every single day. So I'm probably not the best person to ask about that style of newsletter.
I think that one of the things that stands out here is that you want to be very deliberate about where things are best practices and where you want to be stylistic. I worry when people are too focused on best practices. I would encourage all of you, right? Think of the people that you like the most. They have these weird idiosyncrasies, like Jennifer down the block, right? She's like sort of weird. She's always playing her piano upstairs. She wears these weird hats, but then at the same time, that's why we love her, right? And like Jennifer would be like, God, David, how can I fit in more? And I'm like, Jennifer, just be more of you. Like, we love that you're weird. That's what makes you so great. And I would encourage all of you to go pursue that weirdness. It's funny. I'm doing this rite of passage fellowship where we're me and then 7 people who I'm helping. We're writing every single person 10,000 word essay, right? Like insanely hard project. And the essay that I have to review today is this guy who he emails me. He's like, hey, went a little bit weird on this, turned it into kind of an art project. I hope you like it. It is nothing like any essay I've ever read. It's a conversation between capitalism, post-capitalism, inspired by the movie Inside Out. The whole thing is a conversational tone with famous economists sort of rooted into it. It's like an essay that feels like a play with all these personalities, and it's so weird. And no person who is focused on best practices would ever write this thing, ever. But the people who love this thing are going to adore that essay. And I want them to make it even weirder. And so what I like about this, and what I encourage all of you to do, is be like this guy Reese who's writing the essay, be like Jennifer up the block, follow enough best practices to do things right, but be you and be weird and be eccentric. That's what the internet rewards.
Amen. Yeah, you really want to be yourself, but you have to amplify it a little bit because we're communicating over these digital platforms. You're not in person, so people can't see your full personality like they could if you were there in the flesh with them. So don't be someone else, be yourself, but be sort of an exaggerated version of yourself, because that's how you're really going to get your message across through these platforms. So totally agree, David. I heard that was a good book. I actually haven't read that yet. Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance.
It's so good.
Yeah, I hear that from everyone. Cool. All right. Any more? Did we miss any? Got it 4 times. Yeah, it must be good.
It's one of those books that people read sort of every couple of years. And yeah, I can talk about that. Favorite distribution strategies for your writing. Fundamentally, Billy and I just really believe in email. I think that that's what I would say. No matter what you do, whether you're on Instagram, whether you're on Reddit, whether you're on Pinterest, Quora, get people on your email. Naval Ravikant has this great line that building an audience on somebody else's platform is like building a castle out of sand, where the second the wave comes up, the whole castle that you've spent years and years building will just fall and crumble. And Billy, actually, a couple weeks ago, you shared the profile of that YouTuber who lost his audience. And man, dude, that cut me to my stomach. I mean, I'm terrified of that. And that's why for me, email is the one place that I know I can't lose that. Those email subscribers are mine, and my email list is the most valuable asset that I own.
Yeah, my man Bharat. Yeah, his views got cut in half on YouTube for no apparent reason either. And then I had someone else, a friend I know from high school, and she's sort of a yoga influencer on Instagram. And she messaged me like almost in tears because she just started to get this business going. She was finally making some money from brands, and she got shadow banned for some reason where her account wasn't shut down, but she wasn't appearing on anyone's feeds. She would publish and no one would see it. So, that's a risky bet to build on someone else's platform like that. Whereas with email, no one else owns that. Like that, back up your email list. You don't have to worry about it if you're on a modern platform, but that CSV file that you have of email addresses is your most valuable asset in the business. And you can take that with you wherever you go, and no one can take that away from you. So build the email list.
Absolutely.
All right.
Yeah, Jacob, best practice for writing and publishing daily. It's a habit. Nothing stops it. I mean, this was the first commitment I had today. I got my writing done. I did 90 minutes of writing this morning. I had a really early meeting, and I just said, I'm not going to do anything until I get my writing done. So for me, what I do is I do time restricted eating. So I don't get to eat breakfast. I don't get to eat my first meal until my writing is done. And I get pretty hungry. So it works really well. And I got to get it done as soon as I can. For me, it's like, I mean, I tweeted last night something along the lines of, for me, like creativity is what makes life worth living. I mean, it is like without the time that I need to express myself, like my heart literally dies, my soul begins to go dim. And so this 90-minute block every morning is one of the very most important things I do, and I'm religious about it. I mean, the same way that people go to church on Sundays, I write in the mornings, and ain't no nothing getting in the way of that.
Love that. Yeah, I'll tell you one thing I do that really helps is always having a full pipeline of ideas. So it's really tough to sit down and come up with an idea and write. So this is my favorite tool. So again, I take very much a storytelling approach. So what I'll do is I'll be out and about and I'll see something and I'll take a picture of it. And then what I do is, so the picture comes up on the iPhone, and then I export that to a Trello board. So I use Trello in my business for my content calendar. So I do this throughout the day, and then over the course of a week, I got a whole backlog of ideas. sit down Monday morning, I'm like, what am I going to write about? And I got a ton there to choose from. So always have ideas in the hopper. That really helps.
Thank you all. This was a blast.
Yeah.
Thank you for showing up. We will send out a recording, and it was great to see all of you. So if this is the kind of thing you like doing, this is what Rite of Passage is like for 5 weeks, and hope that you join at some point.
Join it. It's amazing.
Thanks, everybody.
See you guys.